Well, now for more analysis on California's eviction ban, we're joined via Skype from Albany by Rebecca Garrard. She's the campaigns manager for Housing Justice of Citizen Action of New York. Great to have you on.
Great to be here.
So first, talk about the regions and communities most affected by these pandemic evictions.
So it's really a nationwide problem. There are some states that currently have no eviction protections in place, such as Texas, South Dakota, and there are other states that have state-level moratoriums in place that are temporarily protecting tenants, such as New York, Connecticut, but there's not a state or community in the nation that's not being significantly impacted by their inability to pay rent and then their inevitable facing of an eviction coming their way.
So then break down the CDC's eviction ban and the qualifications. What exactly does the action do and how long will it be in effect?
Yes, so it basically says that if a tenant signs a declaration that they can submit to their landlord, which states that they have been financially impacted by the pandemic, that they have tried every avenue to receive assistance, that they are at risk of being homeless, and it applies to residents who make $99,000 or less as a single person or $198,000 as a couple. If you meet all of those criteria, you would give the certification to your landlord, and that would prevent them from moving forward on an eviction. And that is and I should say a non-payment eviction. So that is in effect until December 31st.
And you mentioned this idea of some states sort of handling things differently. So how does that gel then with what the CDC is moving to do?
So the CDC did say in their order that any state-level moratoriums that are as strong or stronger would supersede the order by the CDC. So it's especially helpful to states that don't have protections, and in states that do have protections, those remain in effect. There is an argument to be made in states such as New York, where we are fighting for a true ban on evictions, which really the CDC moratorium is not, that this slows momentum, but a lot of states are continuing that fight.
So then with all this considered then, are renters truly being protected?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, for people that had no protections, this is a welcome relief. But we need to be clear, this is not a true ban on evictions. So many states have no-fault evictions where tenants can be fulfilling every obligation of their lease contract or their month-to-month agreement, and a landlord can still evict them just to take back property rights of that premises. And so there's a lot of concern that since this really specifies that it's correlated to non-payment evictions, that landlords will attempt to utilize other eviction methods, right, to sort of get around the protections that the CDC is trying to offer.
Now, we have seen that a higher number of women and minorities have been disproportionately affected in terms of the job losses and the closed businesses, essentially their sources of income. What do we know about what's being done to really support these groups?
Yeah, that's a really great point. So I can tell you that here in New York, 4 times as many black tenants are at risk of eviction than their white counterparts. And so, as we've seen in a myriad of ways, this pandemic has disproportionately impacted all communities of color. And certainly that applies to this housing crisis that is born as a result of the pandemic. And so we really need systemic and holistic solutions and not piecemeal solutions in order to protect everyone who's at enormous risk.
And obviously we saw that not just on top of that, there are also families with the added fallout from these weather events like storms and wildfires. What kind of help is in place for them when it comes to rent or mortgage relief?
Yes, there's a federal piece of legislation called the Rent and Mortgage Cancellation Act, which was introduced by Representative Ilhan Omar. And the basis of that is that the rent that is owed because of COVID would be forgiven. And in the U.S., that is over $24 billion currently, $24 billion. And so that rent would be forgiven, but it funds a landlord hardship fund where if there are landlords who rely on the rent payments to pay their mortgages, to pay their property taxes, to maintain the building, those landlords would be eligible to receive federal funding, which would reimburse them for the rent that they lost. And what it does, which is different than a voucher system, is it excludes funding going to corporate real estate interests, private equity developers who have felt little impact from this and could easily maintain their businesses without federal assistance.
All right, well, thank you. Lots of helpful information there. Rebecca Garrard there, Campaigns Manager for Housing Justice, Citizen Action of New York.